Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. I'm looking for a man with one eye.
Why don't you try looking with both eyes?
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at In the Shadows, Resistance in France, 1943-1944, from GMT Games. In the Shadows, Resistance in France, 1943 to 1944, from GMT Games, 1 to 2 players take on the roles of either the resistance to the German occupation or the Germans themselves as they attempt to crush all resistance to their rule. The game board is a map of France with different regions with different suit symbols on them, and they are subdivided into various zones. You have event cards you're going to shuffle. You have resolution cards you're going to shuffle. The resistance player is going to have kind of red resistance markers and yellow Maquis resistance markers. They're going to place them face down. The occupation player is going to have both blue French milice cubes and black German troop cubes. You have an occupation resource track in which there's going to be a number of face down resistance and Maquis units on that. You're also going to have an authority track, which you're going to place the token at the beginning of that track. You also have a resistance operations rondelle, and you place your resistance operation marker in that as well. Now, essentially, how the game is played is each player is going to draw 2 cards from the event deck. And these events may be things that are favorable to you, they may be things that are favorable to the other side. But critically, they will have suits on them that match the different regions in France, which means you can only use them for the units that are in that specific region at the regular cost. If you use it for units outside of that region, there will be an additional cost to it. If you see the German marker, that's kind of a wild, you can use that in any location. Now, who's ever got the higher number on their initiative card, they can go ahead and decide if they want to go first or second. When that player goes, they actually will do the event, whatever the event is listed, whether it's good for them or good for their opponent, they will do the event, and then they will get the number of occupation or action points rather on the top of that card. You can put your token on how many actions you have left, and then you can proceed to do your actions. Now, beginning with the occupation player, they can spend 1 action to move any one of their cubes, be they French or German, 1 space on the board. Again, anywhere for 1 action. However, if they're moving into a space with an alert marker, it doesn't cost them anything. Now, if a German or French unit is in a zone with a covered, that is to say, an upside down resistance unit or resistance cell or Maquis, you can go ahead and try to uncover it by drawing a card. You draw the resolution card, you look under the uncover action, and you can see, depending on what unit you have on there, whether you succeed or whether you fail. In a selected zone with an occupation unit, you can go ahead and attempt to uncover an informant, that is a red cell that has a German symbol on it, and then that will allow you to uncover an additional resistance cell in that same zone. Now, you can attempt to arrest an uncovered resistance cell or an uncovered Maquis. It only takes 1 occupation unit to arrest the cell, but 2 to arrest a Maquis. Again, you draw a card and you see what the outcome of that action was. In a selected zone with a German unit and an alert marker, you can flip over all of the covered resistance cells there. You can also attempt to round up. Essentially, you have the resources marker in Paris, and that allows you to move it closer to Germany. If ever it gets to Germany, you can move down on the occupied resources marker. That's going to open up some advantages to the German player, but it will also give more units for the resistance to recruit in the game. Now, for the resistance player, they can do a few things. They can move an uncovered unit one space for one action point. They can move a covered space to an adjacent space for two action points. You can attempt to hide resistance units. So essentially, if you have one that's uncovered, you can pay an action point to flip them over. However, you have to pay an additional action point for any German or French milice units that are in that space. Now, with a Maquis unit, you can attempt to ambush the Germans or the French milice. If you go ahead and you draw a card, if you're successful, you can move that German back to Germany. If the milice, you can move to an adjacent location. You can attempt to do sabotage. If you are a resistance unit and there's no alert markers in your space, you can go ahead and draw a card to see if you succeed. Now, if you've got multiple units, you can keep drawing, but you have to accept the results of the last card you drew. And then what that's going to do is allow you to move the rondelle forward. Now, as you're moving that forward, that's making you stronger. And every time you make it all the way around, you can actually reduce the authority. And that's desperately what the resistance wants in the game. Now, if you have units in a pool in front of you, you can attempt to recruit. So you can either recruit in a space with already a resistance cell or in the Lyon space. You draw a card. It tells you whether you succeed or fail and whether or not you can put that unit out on the board. It may tell you you can only put a Maquis unit or only a resistance unit or either onto the board. Now, at the end of every round, there's some housekeeping you're going to do. You're going to bring back the confiscated resources marker back to Paris. You may be able to flip over some of your Maquis units in southern France, and you're going to go ahead and prepare for the next round. So the players are going back and forth. The occupation is trying to uncover and arrest the resistance cells. The resistance are trying to sabotage. They're trying to ambush. They're trying to recruit more units onto the board. Now, victory comes in a few ways. If ever the Gestapo and milice succeed in eliminating all of the resistance cells on the board, they immediately win the game. The occupation player wins immediately if the occupied resources marker makes it all the way down to the end of the track and the resistance does not have the required number of units on the authority track on the board. If at the end of round 9 the number of occupation resources has been met, but the resistance player does not have the proper number of units on the board, then the occupation wins. However, if the reverse is true, then the resistance wins. Into the Shadows, Resistance in France, 1943, 1944. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. Okay, so there's more going on here, but not a whole lot more. That's just a basic overview of the game. There's, of course, some subtleties and strategies that go along here that I'm not really touching on, but basically that's what you're trying to do. The resistance player is trying to get the authority track as low as they can because then that's fewer numbers of resistance units they actually need on the board at any given time. Over the course of the time, the Gestapo can succeed in arresting some of the resistance unit and putting them in the disappeared. There are opportunities with cards to bring some of those people back into play. But essentially, really, that's what you're trying to do as a resistance. You're trying to survive and you're trying to lower that track, whereas the Gestapo is desperately trying to hunt down and put away as many of the resistance fighters as they can. And there's some difficulty here because, of course, they're trying to get that track down, the occupation resources track, but at the same time, when they do, that makes the resistance stronger. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. There's a bit of a tug of war there over opportunities and possibilities in the game. From a thematic standpoint, I think there's a very good it does a very good job here. It does a good job in bringing the tension of the Shadow War, the Twilight War of the French resistance here, and trying to be covert and hidden and not expose yourself to danger, and yet sometimes you have to. In that respect, it kind of reminds me too, the way it plays mechanically, of a coin game. This almost feels like an irregular warfare series game, but it's not that heavy. This is a much lighter game than something like that. I shouldn't say much lighter. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a jest of Robin Hood, which is not terribly heavy. This is lighter than that, but it still is quite engaging, quite tense. It's a good cat and mouse almost chess game with cards there that I really, really enjoy quite a bit. Component wise, I think the board looks great. The cards are great. Again, it's highly thematic there. It's a good little package. It's a good looking package here. I have to tell you, I really, really, really enjoyed the two-player game. I thought, Ray and I played it, and it was fantastic. I thought the two-player game was just a great. It's not a long game, but it's like I say, it's tense. It brings that thematic experience of the French Resistance here. So I really enjoyed the two-player game. We both had a blast with it. I went ahead and I played the solitaire version of the game. And I've got to be honest, I was less enamored with the solitaire version. I'm not a big fan, and I know some people are okay with it, but I'm not a big fan of solitaire games where it's just the flow charts. If this is true, then this. If this is true, then this. I don't find those particularly fun. And this doesn't have a flow chart per se, but it's something kind of like a flow chart. And it seemed like it was a slog every turn. Okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, and it just seemed like for the amount of time I was devoting to figuring out the bot, I spent very little time in comparison with what I wanted to do in the game, and so I wasn't a huge fan of the solitaire version here. But as I say, as a two-player, it's fantastic, and I love the resolution deck here. It's instead of rolling dice, you're drawing the resolution cards. They tell you the different actions and whether they succeed or fail. So no matter what the action is, you draw a card, and you can see depending on the game state, where the units are on the board and what you're trying to do, you can tell whether you succeed or fail. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. It's fun. There's a little bit of iconography you got to get to know, but it's not bad. This is a great game. I was really, really happy with In the Shadows. This is one, as soon as I played it, I want to play it again. I've been fortunate. I played it a few times now, but I just played it the one time as a solitaire game, and it just didn't thrill me. Other people may find joy in it, may not have the issues I had with solitaire, but I got to tell you, on the strength of it's a two-player game, I highly recommend it. I'm going to go ahead and give In the Shadows, Resistance in France, 1943-1944, an 8 out of 10 on the Cody scale. It is super fun. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we'd ask you to please leave a comment for us here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, on X. We would ask you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel here. Give us a thumb. That means a lot to us. And also, again, follow us on social media, Facebook, X. Again, we appreciate it. We would also ask you to give a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek. And if you do like what you see here, please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history, books on history, fun things like that. We would also ask you, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you really do like what we do here, please click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. I'm still mad at my parents for not buying me the expensive brand of rollerblades. Cheapskates.
I was talking to your girlfriend.